Whenever we talk about politics, we usually identify as something conservative, Republican, Democrat, liberal. Everything's got a name attached to it. But there's a problem with this, and that is that it creates an immediate assumption about a person. It fills in all sorts of blanks. Someone might ask me, "Are you a Trump supporter?" And I'll say, "Yeah." It's immediately assumed, just based on that one simple answer, that I'm someone who agrees with every Trump policy, statement, or action, and that conversely, I automatically disagree with anything on the other side of the political aisle. I think really identity politics is the real root of much of our division because it assumes too much. It puts up an immediate barrier to feeling the need to have any further conversation about anything. I often feel the need in any situation regarding a discussion about politics to add, "Yeah, but I'm an American first." In other words, what I'm trying to convey is that I may lean a certain way, but saying I'm one thing or another doesn't define the entirety of my positions. I often refer to the border security issue to explain the difference between towing a party line and believing in something because that's actually my position, because it's actually a good gauge of, why someone is thinking one way or the other. The example I cite is that when it comes to securing the border, that's always been my position, and I point out that it wasn't always a Republican position. You don't have to go all that far back to know that Democrats often accused Republicans of being soft on border security because, well, the Republicans were always the greedy rich who just wanted cheap labor. But if I support border security now, and I also say I support Trump, it's immediately assumed I'm for this policy simply because that's what my party is now for. And being fair, both sides do this. If someone says, "Hey, I voted for Kamala," all sorts of blanks get filled in on the right about that person. Okay, that's all I need to know, we say. There's no need to know anything more. The question I find myself asking more often than not now on so many issues is, how are people actually positioning themselves? This is especially a question I find myself asking about the left because the way I see it, many of Trump's positions actually align more closely with Democrat positions than Republican ones. The issue of wanting secure borders is one good example of that, but so is Trump's America First policies when it comes to manufacturing and jobs. He's a protectionist, something that before Trump was not a Republican position. Republicans were free trade globalists. And by the way, having a protectionist stance was also my position long before Republicans made it part of their platform. Here's the thing, and I've said this many times, Americans have core values that are held by a majority of people most of the time. I think secure borders, strong immigration policy, and having more fair trade to improve our economy and jobs opportunities are some of those core values. My point is, these are not party issues. These are issues important to Americans, regardless of which side of the aisle they happen to claim to be on. Really, when you get down to brass tacks, in order for anyone to win the presidency, they have to have enough policy issues that appeal to these core values to get the necessary votes needed to win. That means winning votes from both sides, their own and the opposing one. In other words, in order for Trump to have won, he needed to appeal to some Democrats as well as Republicans, the swing voters notwithstanding, of course. What I'm saying is that our personal policy positions should not change with our party platforms. And when we find ourselves in a unique opportunity where we now can find our core values are in alignment across the aisles, we shouldn't then abandon those core values just to be in opposition to the other side. That's where identity politics come into play and becomes debilitating. Oh, the border issue is now a Republican issue. Well, I'm a Democrat and I'm supposed to oppose them, so therefore I must now oppose securing the border. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I think most Americans want things to be accomplished that advance us. That's where the term common ground comes from. We want to find it and then work to advance those things we can at least agree on. We can still disagree on things and set those things aside until we can find some common ground. But abandoning ideas just because it's now a different party taking on a position should not be something we should do. That's counterproductive and serves no good purpose. I mean, think about it. We often complain about the two-party system. We're always pinning sides against one another. Maybe that's just part of human nature to some degree. Fair enough. But I go back to what I said earlier, and that's that ultimately, regardless whether or not I label myself as a conservative Republican, I am an American first. And the positions I have are core values important to me, regardless of, which side aligns with it. We accomplish nothing if we allow ourselves to become so entangled in the two-party system we so often complain about that we forget who we are and what's important to us. Again, our core values should be our core values that do not change just because our party happens to swing in another direction or chooses to abandon one. To me, there's a grave danger in allowing ourselves to be led around, confined to supporting parties unconditionally. When Trump made border security a core campaign issue, my response was, finally, my party's come to their senses. Because I knew already that secure borders was such a strong issue held by the left for so many years, again, I said, finally, we can do something about this. Yet instead, the Democrats turned their backs on the issue. How, when, and why should the core value have changed? And where does that lead us, ultimately, as a country, as a people? Calling myself a conservative Republican is really just a generic term to describe where I mostly sit. It doesn't define me as a person. It doesn't blanketly define my core values that are important to me. It's not a guideline or a roadmap. It's not a set of rules I must follow or else. At no time as an American should I ever feel I have to prove something to say I'm on one side or the other. And I get that a lot. If I take issue with something my side is doing or saying, suddenly my faith is called into question as though my loyalty should be to the party I align with and not with my country as a whole. At the end of the day, I'm going to align with what I feel are common sense core values. Those can come from both sides. And I'm going to oppose things that don't make sense to me. Again, that can come from both sides. What I'm saying here is that we can call ourselves whatever we want to, whichever more closely sums up how we lean politically, socially, or otherwise. But what we shouldn't do is allow those things to divide us when it comes to the core values. We have a two-party system, but it doesn't mean we can't still have a diversity of thoughts that sometimes disagree with what our party happens to be for. How do we advance anything if we suddenly disagree just because we're told that's what we're supposed to do because our party says so? When I say I'm an American first, it's not espousing an America First Trump slogan. It's literally saying where my priorities ultimately lie and where my loyalties ultimately are. It's to the country. It's to the American people. It's to American core values and advancing the American way. It's to doing the right thing and making American lives better. It's about understanding everyone has different ideas about what that means, but when it comes to things we can agree on, we should work toward embracing that. I remember a time when we used to collectively agree that a country united stands and a country divided falls. Division is one thing when it has meaning behind it, when we believe in what we disagree about. It's entirely another thing when what we believe is something we feel we must in order to stay within boundaries set for us by people who want us to be divided for political power. Again, this happens on both sides. What I'm saying is that we should all be Americans first and foremost before anything else. We should not let monikers determine good or bad, right or wrong, supportable or indefensible. We shouldn't allow our political identities to get in the way of sound judgment, common sense ideas, or influence the way we feel about things or sway us away from our core values. Our division has always existed, but it's gone too far. It's gotten too mean. It's gone off the rails. It's made us irrational and unhinged. It's turned political discourse into a literal war zone. We're not working to find that ever-important common ground. We're looking for any way we can to simply oppose each other. Even when it's ridiculous, and somewhere at our core we have to hear the ridiculous thing leave our lips and wonder just a little bit, did I just say that with conviction? and then we find ourselves at war with ourselves, fighting against our own logic just to make sure we're fitting within frameworks we're supposed to be committed to at any cost. At the end of the day, we need to identify as only one thing and come to the realization together that that's the only thing that matters, that it's the only thing that should matter. We don't have to identify as conservatives, Republicans, Democrats, liberals, or even as independents. We need to only identify as Americans. And if we do that, we can cut through the rhetoric and the power struggles and simply be a united people who vote our conscience regardless of what letter happens to be on the ballot. They want to divide us in order to hold power and win for themselves. We just want a good country we can live in and enjoy and prosper in. And we have the power to do that if we leave identity politics on the sidelines and have the ability to truly think for ourselves.